welcome back to the Future of Sport Exercise Science podcast. In today's video, we're going to be discussing the topic of the fitness trends of 2023. As based upon the American College of Sports Medicine Journal, every year they release a set of 10 trends.
In audio.
We have to dictate what a trend is to what a fad. A trend is an ongoing topic, something that is consistent, whereas a fad really only has an uprise often in one area, one part of the world, and doesn't necessarily equate to something that's likely to become a trend, something that most people will uptake. So the first trend we're going to look at is wearable technology. Wearable technology includes fitness watches, heart rate monitors, and GPS tracking devices. It discludes any other kind of technology that you cannot festoon upon your body. Wearable technology has been estimated to be worth $100 billion. New innovations include blood pressure and oxygen saturation and electrodiagrams that can be used within the gym on an everyday basis. They can monitor our sleep patterns, cardiac rhythms to dictate whether we are actually achieving our goals or give us at least an indication. But we mustn't take away from the fact that these are very inaccurate. Exceedingly inaccurate, in fact. If something's telling you how many calories you're burning, it's going to be slightly different to something else. Likewise, to get the best result from, say a fitness watch, you need it super damn tight to the point where you will find that it hurts. And as a result, these things are not accurate. They're not accurate compared to more lab-based techniques or even more traditional-based techniques that are not technology-founded, depending on what you're trying to do. So say, for instance, monitor a heart rate is put your two fingers there or there and take a pulse. Even with their limitations, they can help people a lot. They can help people gauge what they do, help people gauge whether an exercise is helping them beyond the physical and beyond what their body tells them. They can get information and relative data that can help them dictate what they're going to do in their exercise or in their training program. But nonetheless, technology can give us freedom, the freedom to improve our lives. And we should not become a slave to technology. I know what you're thinking, this sounds very Terminator-esque, but bear with me.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Often technology is used to increase productivity. However, if we become a slave to that technology, we are not being productive. We are forcing more and more and more work upon us without necessarily getting a result.
Training is many things to many people, but for me, one of the main reasons to train is to increase your freedom. Through fitness, we gain freedom in a very literal sense. Physical freedom. The freedom to move as we choose. Freedom from pain. Freedom to travel further, faster, to see and do more, to increase the number of options we have at any given moment. There are some people who unfortunately lack the mobility and are in too much pain to move as they would choose. So we should never take our fitness and our mobility for granted. And in fact, we should do as much as we can to expand it whilst we can. Being able to move well is critical for self-expression too. The way you move and even the way you sit or stand when not in motion says a huge amount. So we shouldn't view fitness as restrictive or confining. It's not a set of rigid requirements with inflexible rules. Fitness is self-expression. Fitness allows us to become the fullest version of ourselves. And are you dressed, ready for movement? If you're wearing work shoes with a thick sole, high heels and a cramped toe box, then I'd argue not. If your jeans are too tight for you to squat, I'd argue not. Could you break into a run right now if you wanted to? And if not, what's the point of being able to run so well? Too often we view technology as a means to being more productive. Instead, I like to reframe my gadgets as tools for creativity. Even when you aren't using technology to escape the confines of an office, it can be used to move more instead of less. And all this makes sense when you consider that technology is also an extension of yourself. It's time to start making your fitness and your technology work for you.
Tech can open or close possibilities. It's not just about its function or who controls it. Technology can provide a framework for action. The tech allows you to make a choice. We can go into depth here by looking at the work of philosopher Martin Heidegger. Now, some of you are going, Heidegger? Wasn't Heidegger a... Yes, he was. He says when you use one, you don't even think about the hammer. You focus on the nail. The hammer almost disappears in your experience. It's only when it breaks or it doesn't do what we want it to do that it really becomes visible as a piece of technology. The rest of the time, it's just the medium through which we experience the world. Heidegger talks about technology withdrawing from our attention. Others say that technology becomes transparent. We don't experience it, we experience the world through it. Philosopher Maurice Merleau-Ponty took this one step further. He imagines a woman who wears a delicate feather in her hat, and after walking around for a while, she doesn't need to measure a doorway every time to check if she can get through. She actually incorporates the feather into her mental hitbox, her sense of how big she is. Her experience of her own body is extended, or as scuba divers say that once they're underwater, they forget they've got all the kit on. That's the technology becoming semi-transparent. But there might actually be some evidence from neurology to support this. If you give a monkey a rake that it has to use to reach a piece of food, then the neurons in its brain that fire when there's a visual stimulus near its hand start firing when there's a stimulus near the end of the rake too. The monkey's brain extends its sense of the monkey body to include the tool.
And we know that giving a trackable device gives you data that can help expand your life, expand on what you do, and thusly help to give you a greater understanding of the self. If this is combined with a community, it can be exceedingly helpful, especially a social media or an online community that can help push you further if you have some, or even make something more competitive like Concept 1's rowing competitions. If it pushes you further, you're more likely to do more volume, therefore increase your fitness, in theory. The best way to think of your fitness tracker is not as a device that prevents you from doing things, but as a device that should enable you to do things. If we get that balance wrong, we are not improving our life. The second point we're going to look at is home exercise. Home gyms will continue to be a popular alternative to actually going to the gym. And it's something that we've started during 2020 and 2021, mainly due to COVID lockdowns that have prevented people to actually do their fitness that they may enjoy, like going to a gym. The consequences of the pandemic, people will continue to isolate themselves by staying at home and taking advantage of the abundant equipment now available, along with effective online classes. In other words, a hybrid learning.
Okay, Peloton, let's do this. Rachel in London, I see you. Let's see what you've got today.
Basically, it could be anything that you can afford and you can actually own inside your home, or where you got a space to do so. The problem with this statement, and this is anecdotal from what I understand, is that a lot of people, even if they have a home gym, have suddenly turned back up the gym again this year. So I don't know whether this statement's true for where I live, but it might be true for where they've gained their data. And clearly it is, because enough people have said it for it to be on here. I believe that in 2023 that this may not be so accurate as they think it will be. From my own experience, a lot of people have come back to the gym because what you can do in the gym is a lot of things you can't necessarily do outside of the gym or even with their own gym. It's a better environment, there's more equipment. We're not all millionaires. You can own a fully fledged functioning gym. The quality of the equipment might not be as good as you are in the gym. You might not have the same equipment that you have in the gym, and therefore going to the gym is vital. I know a lot of people who own 2 gym memberships because they work up in London. So they have a gym membership if they can get to the gym at home, but once they're up in London, they have their other gym equipment so they can train during their lunch breaks. Now, I realise for most of the country and most of the world, that's not necessarily going to be the case. Nonetheless, there are a lot of people during 2020 who bought a lot of equipment, and they can do the stuff they need or want to do at home. They believe they can train effectively at home without necessarily using the bike as a laundry basket. What you can do at home, and what people have learned, is that they can do different types of training that they enjoy without necessarily going to a gym. With the war in Ukraine happening in the post-pandemic era, a lot of people have got less money while inflation rises, And with inflation rising, it means most people have less money in their pockets while things cost more. Thusly, as a result, people might not spend so much on gym memberships, which may be seen as a luxury. If they are seen as a luxury and people are spending less, they might either become more sedentary and not go to the gym, which is one possibility, or if they're still heavily fitness minded, they'll find other ways, more cheaper alternatives than going to the gym. Carrying on the physical activity that they might have done outside, or trying a new type of fitness or exercise that is free of charge. Take YouTube, for instance. There's hundreds of exercise videos, and the amount of times, even in the gym, I've seen people do exercise and be, oh, I know where that video comes from. That's either a Les Mills you're doing there, or it's, oh, who's that guy with the floppy hair who's got a knighthood? Yeah, that bloke, often very popular. They might not necessarily want to go to a trainer which costs money, or they might not necessarily feel comfortable going to a personal trainer to get their advice, so they will go to things like YouTube videos. There's a cohort, and a lot of people have carried it on from the pandemic years, who've experienced new training from outside the gym, or they've taken up different types of training, and thusly have kept it going throughout the non-pandemic year of 2022. If you are going to set up a home gym, beware of the equipment you can get. Ask yourself certain questions. Do I need this equipment? Is this equipment relative to what I'm looking to achieve? How versatile is this equipment? And most importantly, where and how can I store it? If you're not going to achieve that, all of them four, there's no point buying it. But there is one overriding factor you've got to ask yourself. If this exercise is going to be a fad and I don't have the motivation to continue because I'm at home and maybe just lazy at home, and I don't necessarily, if you don't go to the gym, you might not necessarily have the motivation, because some people will get the motivation from actually being in the environment, actually having someone tell them what to do or speaking to people, then I'm buying all this equipment for what? What reason? Is it going to turn into a laundry basket that house all our washing that's just came out the washing machine? Or are we actually going, other than using it as a clothesline, are we actually going to do what we meant to do? Are we going to get to the point where this equipment is now redundant, I have to get more equipment? Motivation is key to continuing. It's all right having the motivation to do something if you don't have the determination to carry through with it, or you have other perceptions that take greater priority. Maybe you misperceive your time, for instance, which is a very common one. Then you're not likely to continue with the exercise at home. We're going to talk about one that's very much linked to this, and this is outdoor activity. We've mentioned partly for this, but perhaps because of the COVID-19 pandemic, more outdoor activities such as small group walks, group rides. Post-pandemic years, we've seen people uptake classes outside, or even doing clubs like football or track and field, or cycling. Organised hiking groups have become incredibly popular. They can be short events, day-long events, or planned week-long excursions. Participants can meet in the local parks or areas of interest with a designated leader. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a designated leader. You could do it on your own, for instance. Now, with the COVID-19 pandemic, what we saw is that if you were lazy, or if you were not doing the exercise beforehand, the likelihood of you not doing the exercise beforehand, unless you needed something to improve your well-being, or you felt that your health was at risk, your chances of doing exercise was, well, less. The people who came out the gyms and thought, oh no, I can't do anything, their chances of carrying on exercise was the same. And quite often we saw with the physical activity levels with most people was that they were actually sitting down more, so they were actually compensating for the exercise they were not doing. So they might have gone out for a walk with physical activity, but they were just doing what they would normally do during the day. But physical activity is really good. But what we saw was physical activity levels drop over the pandemic years, even amongst the most active. With physical activity in outdoors is a lot different to doing exercise outdoors. Physical activity is general activity to keep us moving. Exercise is planned physical activity. And exercise can be potentially more beneficial than just being physically active. We can all need to be more physically active, that would be helpful, but we can't gain or garner things just from physical activity alone. We need exercise along it in our modern day societies. There's benefits we can get from exercise that we can't necessarily get from physical activity, and vice versa. Being in a green space or an open space can help with our mental well-being. Being more, and this is not just, oh, I'm out in the open, oh, this is lovely. That can also be a benefit, but beneficial in the way that experiencing the world as it is, not just being blatant on a phone or not subvergent to nature, noticing what's going on, having understanding what's going on, can actually help with mental well-being. We experience the beauty living in the moment. I know this sounds very hippie stuff, but this can be very helpful. Can also be used to help engineer physical activity into everyday life. For a lot of people, they can't exercise, and once they exercise, they don't bother. So how do we keep them going? I don't know, let's take them for a walk. Let's get them used into the habits. And once they become physically active, they might want to become more physically active, doing normal things, just moving more. Naturally though, during the winter seasons, we see a big drop in the people doing physical activity because naturally, perceptionally, it's colder. And what you see with nations is this. So generally we become less physically active over the years. We've got generally the colder it is, the less physically active people are. Now, the country I'm from, Great Britain, is an outlier in this because where we situate is probably up here and it's not relevant to our temperature. If we were to take the amount of physical activity people do in my country and try and compare it on that chart, we would have an average yearly temperature of about 9 or 10 degrees Celsius, which is roughly Norway or near enough to the Arctic Circle. People in Scandinavia, on average, let's say countries like Denmark, spend 75% of their time indoors all year round.
We Danes have a word we like to use a lot. Hygge. It's the Danish way. Some translate this to mean cozy.
People in Britain spend about 90%, if not higher, of their time indoors. Some people will get up from a building into a car, out of the car into a building, work, back into the car, go back home. Or in the modern day society, working from home all day inside the house, not seeing the outside world. And a lot of pollutants we have are inside the home, believe it or not, or inside the car, the most pollutant places. So it's best that we get outside and enjoy that environment, get a bit more fresh air, which might be hard if you live in places like London. You think, where am I going to get fresh air? Well, there's plenty of parks you can go to. Plenty of open spaces. And this, where I'm going to lean on and talk about hybrid program. A hybrid program is a mixture of different programs that you can do to help with your fitness. This can include, for instance, doing a class online and then seeing the personal trainer later. And we're seeing a greater uptake of these. A lot more independent learning going on about your own fitness, doing your own fitness in your own time, and then going off somewhere else to do that. And I have actually done that in the past with my own clients. I also have worked for SSA Athletics and also Gymshark, working on doing home, not training programs, but classes, utilising webcam. Strength training. I can't talk how positive strength training is. Before this, we used to call weight bearing training, but any movement that puts pressure upon your knees and joints and things like that. People didn't quite understand it, so we kind of split that up into different forms. We're talking about strength training in terms of lifting weight or doing free weights in particular. Previous surveys included a category described as strength training, determined to be a too broad a category. Strength training was dropped in favour of more specific free weights training. Free weights, barbells, kettlebells, dumbbells, anything that's not attached to a machine. Even medicine balls are considered strength training and do not just incorporate what we would traditionally call weights. Can be incorporated in what we call functional movements, or they can be general compound, as well as isolating the movement, isolating the muscles, so they don't necessarily have to be functional in nature. And strength training is incredibly good for us and incredibly important, especially in an older generation, believe it or not, because it can help decrease bone loss. Helps to maintain bone density. In recent years, there's been an uptake of women doing more strength-based training. That's a positive, because before then it was like, oh, I don't want to get big, and I still see it to this day, and it's mainly in the older generation. They walk in and they know they want to do strength training, but they don't want to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, so they pick up the lightest weight, and I'm like, Jesus, it's not even doing anything for you. What's the point picking up the 0.5s? Or whatever the lightest weight is they can find and doing exercises. You might as well just stayed at home and lift a can of baked beans. What is the point, literally?
At a Paddington London gymnasium, we pay a visit to the weaker sex.
Women's ideas of their bodies have changed, and what is considered sexy has changed. What is society is considered the want. And over the 2010s, the desire for the big booty, or the booty, round booty, or whatever, bubble butt booty, or whatever terminology, has become more popular. Social media has helped to change the popularity of lifting weights, especially amongst females on Instagram. And by doing weight training, they can achieve it. And then what they've done from doing that weight training, they've then moved on to other areas of forms of weight training. And we've seen messages, the strong is the new sexy, or the strong is the new good, and what other phrases that are being used to help promote women to train weights.
Pile on those weights, brother, it's hurting me more than you.
Nonetheless, you doing weight training should not be based upon an aesthetic. It should be based because you want to do it, not because you think other people want you to do it or what the society thinks you want to do. When teaching as a personal trainer, you must describe how to undertake primary movements and explain it's good for them, why they should do it. And it should be placed into an individualized program. If two people are training arms, bicep curls may be the go-to exercise on bis and tris days. But what type of bicep exercises? We can change the exercises. One person might do a ton of bicep curls, all different variants, while one person might only do 5x5 bicep curls. But both will potentially have the same look if they both look roughly the same, if that makes sense. If we are trying to get aesthetics, if we're trying to get general strength, there are ways of doing that as well, but each person's individual. No one program is best for one person. We've got to look at the people holistically. Just because you see someone else doing it online doesn't mean it's good for you. We must implement it in a teachable program that is progressive. In other words, they get heavier, or we change the exercises to make it harder, or we change how much you do.
In audio.
No surprise here, exercise for weight loss, shock, horror. People have always wanted to lose weight for whatever reason, aesthetic wise, but we are getting more obese, so the need for people wanting to do weight loss exercises has become greater. Perhaps because of the self-quarantine imposed by the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting perceived or real weight loss or weight gain, exercise for weight loss has made a comeback in 2022. Most diet programs recommend including some type of exercise program into the daily routine of caloric restriction. Adding the caloric expenditure of a physical activity into the equation can be beneficial. And previously it was ranked only 16th, believe it or not. Now, if you have an eating disorder or you get triggered by this, I recommend you skip along the video. To get into a weight loss, we need to get ourselves into a caloric deficit. And the way we do that is by generally, physics, we say we consume less, and as a result of consume less, we move more, we burn more calories off than what we are consuming, and thusly we get ourselves into a surplus. Now, there are more things that go into the equation, and we always get that one person who is the anomaly as well. But generally, you'll find that with a lot of people who cannot lose weight, it's often social factors or some other factor that's preventing them to lose weight. If someone says they can't lose weight, then they're obviously clearly doing something.
So welcome back to the gym. I'm speaking very softly because A, I don't want to look like a pillock in front of people and not to disturb them. So talking about personal training in this environment, it can be helpful if you are not motivated, if you get someone to motivate, if you want someone to effectively teach you how to do it. And I realise I've got blurred lines going right across my face. This is really retro. And it can keep you accountable, have an accountability to be able to perform what you want to do, accountable in yourself in order to meet your goals, meet your targets. Nonetheless, half the battle is with yourself wanting to actually do the exercises. But most PTs, not legally anyway, cannot write you your nutrition plan, and nutrition is over 2/3 of the battle. So if you've not got your nutrition correct, you may not necessarily meet, if you're looking to do weight goals, to meet those weight goals or meet those muscle goals, for instance. You have to put the work in outside of your time with a PT, unless you're super rich and you can pay for the PT's time full time. Personal training is not for everyone. They may not necessarily have the money to spend the personal trainer. Now, personal training cost is going to be different depending on where you are in the world and what type of gym you're actually going to spend your money at. So I could matter out a few prices, but it wouldn't really mean anything to people outside of the UK. But generally, in my area, you're talking about 40 quid per an hour. Up north in the poor areas, you're talking about 20, and in the super premium areas of London, you're talking anywhere from 150 to 350 pounds. Now, there's reasons beyond fitness why you might want a PT. You might want to have a PT to effectively give you someone to talk to while you exercise, and it keeps you sociable. And people, ironically, do pay for a PT for that reason. They may get motivated because they fancy the personal trainer. Yeah, I know, I heard it, but it does happen. When you choose a personal trainer, you must choose beyond the look of the personal trainer. You must have an understanding of the knowledge that they can provide. Just because they look good and know how to train themselves doesn't mean they know how to train somebody else. And some PTs are worse than others in that respect. Some PTs are more about themselves and not necessarily about the client. Because after all, it is the client who is the most important member of this relationship. Because they're the ones who are potentially paying for their results, and if they don't pay for their results, their novelty wears off. If they get bored, they're out the window, or they're choosing another personal trainer. When it comes to coaches and personal trainers, there's no one coach or personal trainer for somebody. Multiple coaches, multiple personal trainers. Some personal trainers are better than others for that individual. Just because that personal trainer can work with somebody else on the same goal doesn't mean they can help you with your goals on the same thing. Also, some personal trainers are better at, let's say, body recompositioning, or rather than helping an obese person reach a fit state, for instance. Or they may be better and more with mental wellness and fitness with their individuals. Personal trainers are also a source of knowledge and education. They educate and give you knowledge about your fitness journey or about fitness in general. So don't be afraid to ask them questions, and don't be afraid to just sit and listen to them. Even if it may be a lot of information, it can be sometimes a good source of information. Other times it may be a bad source of information. That's why you need to back that information you get from your personal trainer with maybe stuff you see online, or verify them with stuff you see online or what you've read. Also, when you're looking for a personal trainer, make sure you have a clear goal in mind in what you want to achieve. Now, you may not know how to achieve it or why to achieve it. Believe it or not, some people don't know why. But a personal trainer can help you on that journey by setting out clear goals that you can achieve and ask you, are they actually relevant and achievable for you based on the SMART principle? Now, and we're not going to talk about the SMART principle here, but they may be useful to help you in your goal setting. If you're going for fast results with your personal trainer, you're doing it wrong. And if they promise you fast results, then what are they after? Are they after quick buck and money? Because it's not potentially going to help you out. You also want a personal trainer who knows when to push you and when to push back, who helps to motivate you. What's often forgetting when we choose personal trainers is the human skill, the human element. Sometimes you may just need to sit and listen to that individual. Sometimes they may not necessarily be able to hit their PRs in the gym. We all have those off days, and the reason for it, and we have to figure out what those reasons are. And sometimes it may be just, by the way guys, we might have to skip the session because it's just not working out. And that's fine, because it's you who's hiring a personal trainer who should receive the benefit, not the personal trainer.
In audio.
Trend number 7, and that's looking at high intensity interval training, or HIIT training. Now, I do actually have a video on this. You can see that in the card above. If you want to know why I'm suddenly in different clothing, well, I got cold and the battery ran out. Technically, I am filming this about 3 days later. High intensity interval training is basically do maximal training for a prolonged period whilst having short breaks.
Traditional interval training features long periods of moderate exercise followed by short bursts of intense effort. With max interval training, you do long bursts of intense exercise followed by very short periods of rest.
HIIT training, or high intensity interval training, an interval is doing a period of exercise followed up by the break. So that's the interval element. Now, just because you're having and the key is the short breaks, just because you're having a longer break and working at a high intensity doesn't necessarily make it HIIT training. High intensity interval training requires you to have the short breaks in between. Otherwise, effectively, what you are doing is not HIIT training, you're just doing interval training, and that just has to happen to be pretty damn hard to do. Now there's many different types of HIIT training. You can see the most common types of HIIT training on the screen now. Now the rest in between can either be a full-on rest, or it can be what we term an active recovery. In other words, you're doing another form of exercise. For instance, a common one would be on a bike. So you might do 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off. But in that 10 seconds, you're still cycling your legs around, and that would be the active recovery. You're cycling, but just not going flat out. Over the 2000s and the 2010s, there was a massive input, a massive explosion of high intensity interval training, pun intended. And this was based upon our scientific knowledge getting involved as well, helping us to understand how the body works better, revolving around more explosive forms of exercise. And it substituted what we thought was better for fat loss. And it's become synonymous with fat loss, although potentially you might not necessarily want to do it for fat loss. And I think it's a bit of a misnomer. Whatever way, if you're trying to lose fat, you have to get yourself into a caloric deficit. Yes, there are a certain number of people like Nelly London who are over fat. And originally HIIT training was developed along with track and field athletes. But it's gone on from there. They've moved it on to a much more broader, much more wider society. And the beauty about it is that you don't have to do hours long of training. What you can do is, in theory, do as little as I've seen studies doing as little as something like 20 seconds a day, of actual active exercise, but that's not really recommended. What I would recommend most people do is between 30 to 45 minutes of actual exercise. And sometimes that can be more beneficial than an hour and a half, depending on what you're looking to do and whether it meets with your goals. But of course, guys, more information about why that works in that cardio video. Cardio, just bear in mind guys, is not fat loss. Cardio comes from the word to mean heart, or cardiovascular exercise, meaning exercise of the heart. Cardio does not mean fat loss. Number 8 we're looking at is body weight training. Body weight training programs are all about using the weight of the body as the training modality, through a combination of variable resistances through multiple planes. Since bodyweight training requires little to no equipment, it is an inexpensive and functional way to exercise. Most people will do the bodyweight exercising in the form of core or working their abs. Now, your abs aren't necessarily a core. It's all the deep underlying muscle in your torso, from here to here. And it also includes your back muscles as well. Basically, any muscles that you don't see on the outside is your core. And it keeps your posture upright, keeps you tall, and can potentially prevent injuries elsewhere in the body. It can also help with the improvements and function of life. You've seen when people do exercise and suddenly their chest goes out and the shoulders go back. And the beauty about this exercise, it can be done at home as well. You don't have to go anywhere. We can do it outside, although I'm looking outside this frozen window. You might not necessarily want to do it in the snow, but it's up to you. And one of the biggest developments is on-live and on-demand exercise classes. Paid services that you can tap into that can help you to exercise if you got the money and willing to watch all the streaming services, and help from potential PTs. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a TV-based service. It can potentially be, for instance, something like Swollenormous, where he has a Swole network which you can play in as a member, and you get free one-to-one education, personalised and non-personalised personal training program. One of the biggest changes within the health fitness industry resulting from COVID-19 pandemic was a temporary closure of clubs around the world, forcing innovative delivery of classes. Basically, do this to stay employed. As mentioned previously, I have worked with Gymshark, and we did training that was, I wouldn't necessarily say on demand. I was paid to do a webcam class that was debuted out, and I did specifically a HIIT class. Now at SSA Athletics, we did is not specifically online demand, but we did this in order to keep the athletes training over the summer periods when we weren't allowed to be training on the track. So to keep their fitness up while we were trying to isolate. Let's do it. The jackhammer mountain climbers. Remember, one on each leg. And if you completed the burpees, if you completed that challenge, well done. Loads of multiple services. The main three actually were Les Mills.
Today is your day.
Body Pump.
This is the time to put the effort in and time to work.
And Peloton.
Okay, Peloton, let's do this.
Peloton, you need specific equipment. Les Mills, you can have the equipment, but you don't necessarily need it. And Beachbody is a service it's really the first service that offered those on-demand classes by DVDs, and later on inventor of Insanity created these more bodyweight style classes with celebrity trainers, you could argue to a certain degree, creating the program. So it's more about the personality of the trainer rather than the company selling the product.
We can see here different types of apps you can utilize: Peloton, Fit, there's many others. There's also channels we can look at. Amazon have subscription-based services. Les Mills has a streaming service. So we can combine this with like going to the gym, then coming back and doing a particular workout if you can't make the gym, for instance.
And what we are starting to see is a combination of training modalities. People might have, like you might have a Netflix, but also have a TV license so you can watch television. Some people have a gym membership, or they join a club, for instance, and at the same time will pay for a streaming service so that they can exercise. But it'll be interesting to see in 2024 what will happen then. What happens this year that may change that? People are tightening their belts because of a certain Vlad the Putina. And post-pandemic world, we're basically, because of inflation, people's pockets are getting tighter. So it'll be interesting to see if people still stick with that next year. Also, these online demand classes can be very useful, but they're not for everyone. People there to motivate you, to get you going, to get that drive going there. Doing it at home alone in a very comfortable environment, a Hugo environment, may not necessarily be helpful for you. It just might promote you to be a little bit more sedentary or not to do the exercise, get distractions onto other things. Also, you're beating the social element. People go to classes for the social side, to meet up with friends, to have a laugh at their friend falling over or whatever it is, and then afterwards having a cup of tea. I'm in the UK, we always have cups of tea. A new one really, and that's health and wellness coaching. The trend integrates behavioral science into health promotion and lifestyle medicine. The health and wellness coach focus on the client's values and needs and short and long-term goals using behavior change as the main strategy. So basically you're going into the health and wellness, weight loss or whatever other physical goals are not necessary, basically. The main goal is how you feel. Wellness is not a very good term. The terms aren't really well defined, but there's a difference between mental health, wellness and well-being. Mental health is more of a medical term, psychological and emotional well-being, but well-being is still slightly different to what mental health actually is. It's to do with functioning cognitively and about whether you can function cognitively and well in environment. Well-being is how do you feel, whereas mental health is are you feeling well? Well-being is like, so for instance, we can all be, I feel really bad today, but well-being wise, I'm generally pretty good, whereas mental health wise, I could be, I'm feeling better today, but I'm not good overall. Mental health is the overall aspect, where well-being is a little bit more short-term, a bit different, because it can mean different things to different people. Adam, I know what you're saying, but surely the well-being and the mental health definitions are both the same as well. Yeah, it gets a bit confusing. There's no real definition. This is something we discussed in another podcast I used to do with the British Psychological Society, which you can see on the link on the screen or down in the description below. But basically, wellness is, in first, not a passive or static state, but rather an active pursuit that is associated with an intention or choice and actions for health beyond the physical, and that some would argue potentially beyond the mental as well. Wellness is often an individual pursuit. We have self-responsibility for our own choices, behaviours and lifestyle, but it's also significantly influenced by the physical and social or cultural aspects or environments we find ourselves in. While there are common elements among them, wellness is distinguished by not referring to a static state of being happy, being content. Rather, wellness is associated with an active process of being aware and making choices that lead to an outcome of optimal holistic health and well-being. Yeah, not a very easy definitions to throw out there to a lay audience. Well done, Adam. Give yourself a pat on the back there. But wellness can be categorized really into physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, social, and environmental. And to be honest with you, in this sector there's a whole load of bro science and snake oil being thrown at you, and it's been going for centuries. So we have to be aware what it is that we are looking for. It is what we are trying to do and achieve, and be able to achieve that within that wellness setting. Likewise, though, we also have to be aware that people are doing wellness as an argument because most of it can't be scientifically proven. And because it can't be scientifically proven, ideas can be thrown out there as fact, rather than as opinion or anecdotal knowledge, so to speak. And especially you see this a lot in body positivity, where they're not exercising to lose weight, they're exercising to achieve a better person, or to achieve a better mental state, or better active state, so to speak. They're not exercising for their mental health. They're not exercising to lose weight, to get bigger, to get stronger. They're exercising for something that can't necessarily be explained in a traditional sense. They're exercising for something that can only really mean something to them or their communities. When I went to a Grenade talk with Nathan and a few other social media influencers, no, I'm not including myself as a social media influencer because I paid to be there, but what he discussed, anecdotally may I add, on his world travels, that when going around the world there was a greater interest into looking at wellness and well-being, but in certain parts of the world like the UK, certain parts of America, it's still not about improving or focusing on exercise for mental health, exercise for improving well-being, or focusing on the well-being side of exercise and exercising for wellness. It's still looking at the physical terms of how can I physically improve, rather than looking at, because when you do exercise there is a mental change in a person. That people exercise because they enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, you're unlikely to exercise. That's an example of a passive state, so to speak. And what we got to be careful at is, if you're looking for someone who is helping you coaching and they class themselves as a wellness coach, it often means they're not trained to coach you in a traditional sense in personal training. So beware of the mumbo jumbo out there and the bro science that's being thrown around. Stick to channels like this where we utilize scientific fact and have journal articles journal article names fly up from out the ether from the bottom of the screen, as well as where we credited our sources. And it's important that we have a repertoire of people we listen to so we can get a good understanding of the total environment and information. My opinions on things are going to be different to TFNL's opinions on certain things. And that's okay, because we both understand that there is fact behind it, but at the same time, we come from different viewpoints. 2023 will be interesting. We are not very good at predictions. We can utilize information, but historically we underestimate time and overestimate human progress. Likewise, guys, I hope you enjoyed listening to this. This is Future of Sport Exercise Science Podcast FSXS. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.